Good morning, I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is on assignment right now on Morning News Now, premeditated and calculated. Prosecutors say the 4th of July parade shooting suspect had planned the attack for weeks. He has now been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder, and the DA says more charges are coming.
These are just the first of many charges that will be filed against Mr. Crimo. I want to emphasize that. There will be more charges.
The new information we've learned about America's latest major mass shooting and what authorities are saying about the suspect's plan to escape. Deadly record with more than 300 mass shootings identified just this year. America is nearing record territory for violence. Now, in the wake of yet another mass shooting and less than 2 weeks after President Biden signed the first new gun legislation in decades, there are new calls for action. But with few expecting Congress to do more, some states are taking matters into their own hands. Price pain. Americans across the country are feeling the pinch from rising costs. After one of the most expensive Independence Days in recent memory, the threat of a recession is looming large. We're talking about families' concerns and asking the experts what you can do to save money. And Safe Haven. This may look like your typical summer camp, but for its campers, it is so much more. We'll introduce you to the camp that's giving LGBTQ plus teens from around the country a safe space when many need it most. Good morning. We're happy to have you with us on this Wednesday morning. We do begin in Highland Park, Illinois, where this morning yet another American community is picking up the pieces after a mass shooting. There's a growing memorial at the scene of the shooting that has now claimed 7 lives. Police say the suspect has been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. Investigators say he had at least 5 guns, including rifles seized at his father's home. Investigators say he disguised himself as a woman to escape after the attack. That's what you're seeing on your screen there. Meanwhile, 6 of the 7 victims have now been identified. They include 78-year-old grandfather Nicholas Toledo Zaragoza, Jacqueline Sondheim, 64-year-old mom Catherine Goldstein, husband and wife Irina and Kevin McCarthy, and grandfather Stephen Strauss. On Tuesday, Vice President Kamala Harris visited the scene of the shooting and called for more gun restrictions.
We got to be smarter as a country in terms of who has access to what, and in particular assault weapons. And we got to take this stuff seriously as you are, because you have been forced to have to take it seriously. The whole nation should understand and have a level of empathy to understand that this can happen anywhere.
We're digging into the investigation with NBC News correspondent for investigations Tom Winter and the calls for action with Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Rafa. But we begin with NBC News correspondent Shaq Brewster, who has the latest from the ground in Highland Park.
Good morning, and we'll see that suspected shooter in court for the first time a little bit later this morning around 11 a.m. Eastern time. He's been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecutor saying that this is the first wave of charges, and we can expect to see dozens of more in the days and weeks to come. Now, those charges were filed just minutes before we saw Vice President Kamala Harris make an unannounced trip to Highland Park. She met with family members, she spoke with members of the community, sent her prayers and her condolences from the president and herself, and she also warned other what she called peace-loving communities that their communities could be shattered if action is not taken on assault weapons specifically. Now, we also heard from the prosecutor, who gave details on the investigation and what they know up to this point. We learned that the suspected shooter gained access to the top of that rooftop via a fire escape, climbing a ladder affixed to that building, that he escaped with help from the chaos that he caused himself. He was disguised in women's clothing and left as people were fleeing the scene, went to his mother's house, drove across state lines to Wisconsin before returning to Illinois and being captured about 15 minutes from where I'm standing right now. This is a community that is grieving, especially as we learn more information about the victims, the 7 people who lost their lives on July 4th. I want you to listen to a little bit of what we heard from some of the victims, the family of the victims, in conversations with Lester Holt yesterday.
I told her that it was a shooter and that she had to run, so I started running with her, and we were next to each other, and he shot her in the chest, and she fell down, and I knew she was dead. She was just a good mom. I got to have 22 years with the best mom in the world.
You see the pain that this is causing so many members of the community. I met a lady yesterday who said she was scared to go to the grocery store right down the street from her because of the fear that she felt. And the last time she left her apartment, she saw people fleeing the shooting. If convicted, the suspected shooter will face a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Back to you.
All right, Shaq Brewster, thank you so much. Now for the latest on the investigation, let's get to NBC News correspondent for investigations, Tom Winter. Hey, Tom, good morning. So let's start with just what is next in this investigation. The state's attorney for Lake County says additional charges are expected. What do we know about this?
Right, Savannah. So this is obviously going to speak to the victims here who did not die but were shot by this individual. They're going to want to charge him for those as well. As Shaq alluded to, just one conviction on any of these homicide counts because of the nature of which they were charged is effectively a life sentence for this shooter. On the other hand, you want to make sure you get justice for all of the victims that were involved in this. And anybody who was shot by this, it's obviously horrific, even if you were able to survive from it. So we expect at this point for that to be, for those charges to be brought to bear. And on top of that, assuredly, weapons charges will be brought, perhaps some other charges. It just depends on what they uncover in the investigation.
Now, Tom, authorities are calling this a premeditated and calculated attack that had been planned for weeks. Do we have an idea here about what the motive could be? I know that's always something difficult to determine, but does the fact that they have enough evidence to say he was planning it help us in determining that?
Right. Well, unlike other recent shootings that we've had, there is the possibility here that we might get to the bottom of why this individual did what they did. I think one of the reasons for that, first off, they're alive. That's a difference from, say, the Uvalde shooting. But what we also have here is a prolific online social presence. This individual may have had other storage accounts or cloud accounts that information may be contained on that. On top of that, they'll be able to get the cell phone and be able to download that and gather more information from there. And the other big thing here, Savannah, is that he is talking to law enforcement, according to police in their briefings yesterday. They have had discussions with him. We don't know to the extent of that cooperation, but presumably any information is better than none. So it is quite possible that we'll get to the point of motive. We may even see that come out in court papers. That could be part of the additional charges. It just depends upon what they find and what he says.
Tom, in addition to him speaking with police, I mean, we're learning a lot from his own presence online, these music videos depicting school shootings. We also now know that law enforcement were called to his home for 2 incidents in 2019, including one where he was threatening to kill family members. Knives, a dagger was confiscated. I think to most people who hear information like that, those seem like red flags. I mean, what is a red flag if not that? What do we know about that and what that meant police were watching with him?
Right. So it does appear to us, of course, and most people watching, that those would be red flags. We're talking about 16 knives, a dagger, and even a sword, not something that one has at their home decor. So, yeah, this is potentially quite concerning. The issue here is what is legally a red flag and what that actually means when those type of laws, and Illinois has a type of law that's commonly referred to as red flag, what that means legally versus all the things that we're looking at, kind of this culmination of evidence, if you will, that this individual had serious issues. I think when you look at the red flag law, it's something that only speaks specifically to guns. It's important for people to know it's not just something that law enforcement can use. Anybody could use it. If I thought, Savannah, that you were armed and that you were a threat to yourself or others in New York State, for instance, I could go myself and petition the court. Now, at some point, you'd have the ability to respond, and I can't lie to the court, of course, or otherwise I would be charged myself. But these type of laws exist, and it allows for a quick process to intercede and interdict. We need to know more about those interactions. We need to know more about what concerns family had. And of course, all of those incidents that you just spoke about were 3 years ago.
Tom, the other thing that caught my attention, though, based in the same vein, and especially as we ask how could something like this happen, that incident that we were just talking about with all the knives, the dagger, the sword confiscated, that was in September of 2019. 3 months later, in December of 2019, that's when his father sponsored his application for his gun license, according to Illinois State Police. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, the issue is it's not necessarily legal for him to have those knives, and if police at that point don't have probable cause to make an arrest, in other words, he didn't run afoul of state law, there's nothing there that they could have charged him for. Of course, if he was charged and convicted at the felony level, he would not have been able to get a gun. That's an important thing for people to know. But, you know, they kind of came right up to that line, but didn't cross it, Savannah, and that's the reason why he was able to get that state ID card, which allowed him to purchase the guns, all of which were purchased legally, as we first reported yesterday, and why this tragedy was allowed to occur.
All right, Tom Winter, thank you so much. We'll keep talking to you about all this. Democrats are once again calling for tighter gun restrictions following this latest mass shooting. This comes less than 2 weeks after Congress passed a bipartisan bill in response to the Uvalde Elementary School shooting just in May that killed 19 students and 2 teachers. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Rafa joins us with more on this. Hey, Ali, good morning. So, you know, we've been down this road before where Democrats unite in calling for more action federally following a mass shooting. We actually did see more action federally following Uvalde, but what are they saying now in response to this shooting, to what happened in Highland Park?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, I think first off, it's interesting what Tom said about this still being under investigation, whether these red flag laws, specifically in Illinois, would have possibly prevented this shooter from getting these guns. That's something that is still under investigation, and it's not really clear whether any of the provisions in this bill, as you mentioned, that President Biden signed into law less than 2 weeks ago now, would have prevented this from happening. I think notably the 4 main players in the negotiations, the 2 Republicans and 2 Democratic senators, Murphy, Cornyn, Tillis, and Sinema, were pretty quiet yesterday in reaction to this shooting, but we saw just a swarm of reaction from the majority of Democrats who are renewing their calls for several of the things that they didn't get in this bipartisan gun package, like an all-out assault weapons ban or raising the minimum age to be able to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21. One of those Democrats was Senator Dick Durbin. Listen to his reaction here.
There is no reason for a person to own a military assault weapon. It has no value for hunting or sports or even self-defense. It is a killing machine.
And Democrats called even for more action from President Biden, possibly even renewing calls for that 2004 all-out assault weapons ban. You even heard Vice President Kamala Harris speak in Illinois, asking for more change. So it really seems like we're back where we started, despite this historic gun reform, the biggest change in gun reform that we've seen in nearly 30 years. Still calls for action, Savannah.
Yeah, Ali, let's talk about the other side here. So we're also hearing from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who supported that bipartisan gun bill last month. That's how it got over the line, was the support of Republicans as well. What's his response to this shooting and to these calls for change?
Yeah, we heard from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell yesterday back home in Kentucky, and he touted the passing of this bill several times, saying he, quote, thinks this bill that we passed targeted the problem. In particular, he says, in particular, it was school safety and mental health that he says was the reason for the shooting in Illinois. Take a listen to part of his reaction.
I think yesterday's shooting is another example of what the problem is. The problem is mental health, and these young men who seem to be inspired to commit these atrocities. So I think the bill that we passed targeted the problem.
So those are similar arguments and reactions that we heard in the wake of the Uvalde shooting and the Buffalo shooting from Republicans, saying that this is more of a school safety issue. This is more about mental health. Those were several of the provisions that were passed in that bipartisan gun safety bill, more funding for those 2 things. So Republicans across the board really not showing any eagerness to reopen this debate over gun reform, Savannah.
All right, Ali Rafa, thank you so much. Now, a Georgia grand jury has subpoenaed Rudy Giuliani and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham as part of its investigation into possible interference by former President Trump in that state's 2020 election. The grand jury also subpoenaed members of Trump's legal team. NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delaney joins us now for more on this. Ken, good morning. So there's some big names in this latest batch of subpoenas. Let's start off with Rudy Giuliani. What does it say about his alleged role in overturning Georgia's election result?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, first of all, it's important to point out that these subpoenas demonstrate yet again that this Georgia investigation may be the most perilous for Donald Trump and the people around him. Georgia seems to be far ahead of where the Justice Department is in investigating these efforts to overturn the election. In terms of Rudy Giuliani, the subpoena focuses on his presentation to the Georgia legislature back in December 2020 of this video that he purported to show, he alleged showed workers at the State Farm in Atlanta, bringing in suitcases of fake ballots. Well, within days, that had been debunked by Georgia officials, but Giuliani presented it anyway as fact. And the subpoena is suggesting he should have to answer for that, Savannah. In terms of what his attorney has said, he's not yet been served with the subpoena. In the past, of course, Giuliani has consistently denied wrongdoing in this matter.
Another big name on the list, as I mentioned, Senator Lindsey Graham. What does his subpoena say?
Right. So that subpoena focuses on Graham's conversations with the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Graham called him and other Georgia officials and sort of used his influence as a prominent senator to ask these state officials to re-examine the counting of absentee ballots. Now, again, Graham has not commented on this subpoena, but in the past, his spokesperson said that Senator Graham was, quote, asking about how the signature verification process worked. He never asked the Secretary of State to disqualify a ballot cast by anyone. Well, he'll now have to answer questions about that before a special grand jury in Georgia, Savannah.
Now, the big question that we have here, just as we've had with the federal investigation, as well as even just the January 6th committee exploratory investigation here, is will these people comply? The subpoenas say witnesses must testify between July 12th and August 31st. Any indication if they're going to do that, and what happens if they don't?
Oh, Savannah, this is much different from a congressional subpoena. This is a criminal special grand jury, and these subpoenas were signed by a judge because they target people out of state. So, and the subpoenas note that the state of Georgia has cooperation agreements with authorities in other states, including New York and other places. So these people will have to comply, and if they don't, they're subject to being held in contempt of court and even being put in jail, Savannah.
All right, Ken Delaney, and we'll keep watching for that. Thank you so much. Now, the January 6th committee has set a date for its next public hearing. The House committee says the session will take place next Tuesday, July 12th at 10 a.m. Eastern. This will be the 7th hearing looking into the attack on the Capitol. So far, the committee has not announced any witnesses for that hearing. And while it's still unclear what exactly the topics will be, committee member Adam Schiff told Face the Nation over the weekend that the next hearing is expected to focus on, quote, efforts to assemble the mob on the mall, as well as the participation of white nationalist groups like the Proud Boys. Now, President Biden is heading to Cleveland this afternoon to share more of his strategy on improving the economy as part of his American Rescue Plan. For more on that, let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee. Carol, good morning. So, this visit comes as Americans deal with just everything costing more, everything being tough to pay for. What can we expect the president's message to be today?
Well, Savannah, this message from the president today is going to be about pensions. So this is a piece of the American Rescue Plan that is designed to preserve pensions for workers and retirees. And so that's what the president is going to talk about. He's going to talk about how the provision in the American Rescue Plan will make those pensions available despite the economic downturn that we've seen because of the pandemic, and then on top of that, other issues. And he's going to Cleveland to do this against the backdrop of a union. So he's really trying to make his case to working class Americans, saying that he is out there fighting for them and that this is a piece of that, and the White House says that this will impact roughly about 2 to 3 million workers and retirees. And so the president traveling to Cleveland, it's his 4th time traveling to Ohio since taking office. So this is a state that he clearly has his eyes on, and these types of voters are those that he feels like he may be able to win over. Despite his very low approval rating, this is something that the White House hopes will resonate with workers and that he can tout as one of his big accomplishments, Savannah.
Carol, one of the other things that, of course, is really hurting is the price of gas. Every time you have to fill up, I mean, it just seems like it's getting worse and worse. Now, last month, President Biden proposed a gas tax holiday as a way to at least do a little bit to ease the burden. Where do things stand on that front?
Not really anywhere that looks like it's going to make headway here, Savannah, frankly. This is something the president proposed 2 weeks ago. At the time, the White House, even privately, knew that this was something that wasn't going to take off in Congress. Members of the president's own party aren't for it. And then you have Republican opposition. So it hasn't gone anywhere. And what we've seen in the 2 weeks since the president called for the Congress to pass this 3-month gas tax holiday is that he's lashing out at other things that he thinks are responsible for gas prices. Over the weekend, we saw him tweet about gas station companies saying that they are not passing the savings, the lower gas prices that we've seen recently, lower oil prices we've seen recently to the consumer at the gas pump. That drew a lot of criticism from Republicans, from Jeff Bezos, the Amazon titan. And so the White House is pushing back, saying that the president is trying to do everything he can to get gas prices lower. Notably, Savannah, he's also going to Saudi Arabia next week, and that's a space where the White House is hoping that he may be able to do something to try to lower those gas prices. But so far, not any success.
Carol, before I let you go, I do want to ask about something coming up Friday. We'll get the June jobs report from the Labor Department, and economists are predicting fewer jobs were added last month compared to the month before. Is that something the White House is concerned about?
You know, this is going to be really interesting because this is a report where they don't want it to be too good and they don't want it to be too bad. So there's this kind of sweet spot that the White House is hoping for in terms of the number of jobs increases. Because if there are too many job increases, that might push pressure on the Fed to take more action. That puts other pressures on the economy. If the jobs report is really bad, and there aren't a lot of jobs that were created, that's going to then, create other sorts of issues. And so the White House is hoping that it's somewhere in the middle, not too good, not too bad.
All right, we'll have to wait and find out on Friday. Carol, thank you so much. And now it is time for a check on your morning news now. Weather Michelle Grossman joins us in her Wednesday pink, which makes me so happy. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning. You look so pretty. I love that.
Thank
love
you.
it so much.
I love yours.
Thank
it's kind
you.
of summery. Looks like coral. Sort of love it.
It's very. I feel like I should going to the tennis club. But we'll do that later. All right, let's talk about weather because we are busy. We're looking at severe storms today once again. We're also looking at dangerous heat. So 2 big weather stories today. We're already seeing radar lit up this morning, and this is only going to blossom as we go throughout the day. So you can see some storms in the plains, also through the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley. And we have a big area today that we're going to be watching some storms. We could see gusty winds, some damaging hail, and also some flooding rains as well. So this is what we're looking at today from Montana all the way to the Carolinas. We could see strong to severe storms again with those concerns. 29 million people at risk. We saw a wind gust yesterday of 96 miles per hour in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Not going to see that today, but we do have the chance for that severe weather once again. And then look at tomorrow, kind of a repeat performance, right? We're looking from Montana once again into the Carolinas. We shift a little further south, so now we're into parts of Georgia as well. But 30 million at risk tomorrow with winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. Could see some large hail once again. The tornado threat is low, but again, it's not zero. It was low yesterday, and we still saw a tornado in Bowie, Maryland. So taking a look at your rainfall forecast, you can see a lot of darker colors on here, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. That's indicating where the heavy rain could fall. We could see flooding rain and downpours, so torrential downpours, those summer-like storms where we see a lot of rain in a short amount of time. So anywhere from 1 to 3 inches, locally higher amounts. Also, the other big story is the dangerous heat. 62 million people impacted. We're looking from the plains into the southeast, also parts of the Ohio Valley into Virginia and the Carolinas too. So we do have an excessive heat warning. That's in the hot pink there. And it's because we're going to see temperatures climbing into the upper 90s, into the triple digits in some spots. And notice that heat index value up to 115. That is dangerous territory. That's when you want to stay indoors if you can, and also find some shade if you need to be outdoors. So 101 today in St. Louis. It's going to feel like 110. Same story as we go throughout tomorrow, feeling like 107 in St. Louis, and this heat will stay in place as we go throughout the weekend. So Summer is here in full force.
Wow, yeah, look at those Dallas temperatures.
I know.
105 over the weekend.
Yeah.
I know. It is always nice when we get a little weekend preview on Wednesdays. I like that too.
It's nice,
it's like,
right?
all right, we're nearing the weekend.
And Northeast is going to look really good.
Yeah, all right, there you go. Yeah. Michelle, thank you. See you in a little bit. And coming up, travel trouble. While weekend flights went smoother than expected in the U.S., overseas obstacles are causing a major mess. And those issues are leaving some Americans stranded. The impact it could also have on your summer plans. That's up next. We're back with more travel chaos, this time overseas. As U.S. airlines recover from a busy 4th of July weekend, European airlines and airports are now struggling with a surge of passengers amid staff shortages. Here's NBC News correspondent Tom Costello.
Across Europe, striking airline and airport workers demanding better pay are bringing air travel to a crawl. In France, Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands. At London's Heathrow Airport, packed terminals with lines that seem to wind forever. Hours-long delays and few customer service reps.
Still got, I should think, another hour or a couple of hours to go. And we've been told that there's no flights.
Just like the U.S., summer passenger volumes are surging in Europe. But airports and airlines are short-staffed. And a double whammy for anyone flying SAS. Filing for bankruptcy and facing a pilot strike, the airline canceled nearly 80% of its flights, stranding many travelers, including NBC producer Tracy Snyder in Estonia.
Oh, it's so frustrating. Last day of vacation, we had to spend an hour and a half on the phone with SAS customer service. We never got through.
Opting to buy a return ticket home on a different airline. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., the July 4th weekend brought relief. Far fewer cancellations than Memorial Day or Father's Day weekends. Still, 1 out of every 5 flights delayed. Summer storms remain the big variable.
So we may have to slow down the amount of traffic coming into those airports and coming out of it.
And we do have roughly 515 flights canceled Tuesday evening with volatile weather targeting the East Coast from D.C. up to New York. Reports of tornadoes on the ground in Maryland. Back to you.
All right, Tom Costello, thanks so much. Now, at least 7 climbers are dead after a glacier avalanche in Italy over the weekend. Rescue teams are now racing to find at least 5 more people that could be buried under the ice and rock. Italian officials say this could be linked to climate change. NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo has the latest on the search.
Search and rescue resumes on the ground and in the air in Canazze, Italy. Days after a large chunk of glacier came roaring down a mountainside in the Alpine resort town.
Cosa abbiamo visto? Abbiamo visto un disastro.
Ice, snow, and rock crashing around hikers on a popular trail. At least 7 people have died and 9 are left injured in the Marmolada avalanche. Italian officials announcing this afternoon that 5 people are still missing, down from 17 over the weekend.
È un numero che va riducendosi, pur essendo sempre un numero molto tragico.
The best chance of getting someone out of an avalanche alive is when their partner can locate them and dig them out within the next few minutes. If you have to go for help, it's probably too late.
The cause of the glacier cascading down is still unknown, but the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi speaking out on Monday.
Oggi l'Italia piange queste vittime.
Blaming this tragedy on climate change.
Ma certamente dipende dal deterioramento dell'ambiente e della situazione climatica.
According to the Italian Council for National Research, the Marmolada Glacier has lost 30% of its volume between 2004 and 2015, adding that the glacier might practically disappear in the next 30 years.
We see this same phenomenon in the Himalayas. We've had huge avalanches on Mount Everest a few years ago, for example, and they are all primarily due to climate change.
The disaster striking just 1 day after a record high temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the glacier summit. Families of those still missing expressing anger that their loved ones were allowed on the trail in the first place.
Quindi io dico, l'autorità predisposta a fermare le persone, visto il clima che c'era, visto i giorni precedenti, dov'è? Esiste un'autorità?
Our thanks to Stephen Romo for that report. Now, investigators have yet to release the names of the victims, but they were able to uncover some of the hiking gear now that conditions have stabilized. The gear should help officials identify the bodies before notifying the families. Let's get you some more international headlines now, with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson under increasing pressure as more top officials resign. NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv with that and other news this morning. Hey, Raf.
Hey, Savannah, that's right. Boris Johnson's grip on power may be slipping after a series of ministers resigned, including a couple in just the last few hours. The prime minister has been hit by multiple scandals. The latest involves his decision to promote a member of parliament who had previously faced accusations of sexual misconduct. Johnson apologized and said he's getting on with the job. In Australia, the homes of 85,000 people are at risk amid major flooding around the country's largest city. Sydney's been hit with heavy rain, which caused nearby rivers to burst their banks. The rain is easing, but this is day 5 of the crisis, and government officials are warning it may not be over yet. And finally, a superhighway for sharks and turtles and rays. The Mesoamerican Reef, which stretches for 600 miles from Mexico to Honduras, is the second largest barrier reef in the world, but it's under threat from overfishing and commercial development. Savannah, a new alliance is being set up to try to protect the reef and to keep that shark superhighway rolling.
Wow, pretty neat to hear that fishermen are trying to protect it. Raf, thank you so much. Now, summer means mosquitoes are back. Coming up, we'll take a look at new research that breaks down why some of us might be more vulnerable to bites than other people are. Plus, investigators say the alleged shooter who opened fire on a 4th of July parade had a disturbing and violent social media history. Up next, we'll look into what it takes for police to get involved and the one thing they say could help them most. Welcome back. We're continuing to learn more about the suspected shooter in the Highland Park parade attack that left 7 dead and dozens more injured. According to officials, the shooter left a trail of red flags across social media, including disturbing posts and images. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns takes a closer look at the signs.
We're learning more about the man held in police custody for Monday's mass shooting. 21-year-old Bobby Cremo III appears to have left a trail of violent social media posts. Before the 4th of July shooting that left 7 dead and more than 30 injured, he performed as a rapper, sharing disturbing music videos depicting mass murder. One of his recent videos shows him holding an American flag in a staged classroom with what appears to be shell casings on the floor. We're blurring the screenshots of the video to not give him further notoriety. Authorities say they were called in September 2019 by a family member because of alleged threats that he was going to, quote, kill everyone.
Would this potentially have been enough for you to confiscate weapons or take some sort of action?
So in the case of September, the knives that Cremo possessed, they were confiscated and they were secured for safekeeping.
It's rifles and considering the social media posts and the videos that we have now seen.
So at that time, there was no information that he possessed any firearms, any rifles. Would that be enough if he's making threats? It's a case-by-case basis.
Another video shows a cartoon wearing a shirt with his YouTube channel's logo on it, holding a long gun and being shot by police. In a tweet posted last year, Cremo can be seen draped in a Trump flag with the caption, "Spam." He's also apparently seen in a video that appears to show a Trump motorcade leaving an airport. His Twitter account has been suspended and the YouTube channel is unavailable.
We are reviewing those. Those are going to be a part of any investigation efforts by our task force investigators, Highland Park Police. We'll look at them and we'll see what they reveal.
Cremo had his own Discord server where his community could chat about memes and politics. The most recent post before the shooting was a picture of Bud Dwyer, the Pennsylvania state treasurer who shot and killed himself on live television in the 1980s, along with the caption, "I wished politicians still gave speeches like this." But is this behavior enough to sound the alarm legally?
It's possible that enough violent imagery, coupled with statements of intent to do harm, could rise to the clear and convincing level an Illinois court needs in order to issue a restraining order.
As investigators learn more about Cremo from his online presence, they have yet to determine a motive.
Investigators are very much furthering the investigation. They have been in discussions with him. I don't have anything to say about motivation thus far because it hasn't been provided.
This isn't the first time authorities examined disturbing social media posts in the wake of a mass shooting. The Parkland shooter posed with a gun, showing his, quote, arsenal. The alleged killer in Uvalde posted a photo of 2 AR-style semi-automatic rifles.
Would you recommend that community members in this community or others
flag police to that kind of information? You said you weren't aware of it beforehand. Were you, if you were aware of it, could this have prevented something like this, considering the red flag laws and other laws here in the state?
Absolutely. If the public sees something that is concerning online with anybody, they should notify the social media network it's posted on. They should notify local law enforcement. And that's when we get involved and we conduct an investigation. Law enforcement's going to do everything they possibly can to ensure the community is kept safe. But if we don't know about it, it's hard for us to investigate.
Our thanks to Dasha Burns for that report. Now, the gunman was charged with 7 counts of murder, with more charges expected to come. He faces life in prison without the possibility of parole if he's convicted. Here now with a first-hand account of what happened during the parade is Gavin Solinger. Gavin, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for your time this morning. I understand you were at this parade with quite a bit of family. It seems like it was a tradition for your family, correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd been going for some years. Your 19-year-old son, your 16-year-old daughter, your wife, your parents. My first question is just, how are you all doing a couple days removed from this now?
Good morning, Savannah. Yeah, thank you for asking. We are, I think we at first were just with the adrenaline and everything, we're focused on getting out of there, and we thought we were okay. I think a day or two later, things start to settle in and you feel a lot less than okay. Physically, thank God, we're all fine, unharmed physically, but definitely not emotionally.
I know it sounds like from hearing your account that there was at first this thought maybe by your wife that it might have been firecrackers. You know, it was obviously a loud parade. I know your son was part of the marching band. You're expecting to potentially hear noises like that at a 4th of July celebration. But when did it click for you what was happening? What do you remember about the moment when you thought, am I actually in one of these situations right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you're absolutely not expecting this, obviously. And so your brain isn't thinking this. Your brain is thinking, this is wonderful. You know, we haven't had this in 2 years. We haven't had a 4th of July parade. As you said, we've been to every single one for, over a decade. We're so happy to be back. People were in like such a good mood. It just felt like a great 4th of July again. Things were back to quote unquote normal. The band had just passed us and they were still playing. You know, we'd kind of run around to take pictures of my son and the entire band. And they literally just walked past us and you could hear them playing. And then you started to hear this like rat-a-tat-tat, this noise. It was just like pow, 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 pow. Like it seemed like 1,000 times in a row. And at first you kind of looked around and people were like, oh, it's, my wife said to me like, oh, it's just firecrackers. That's awesome. They must have them over there or something. And I don't know why it was like in my head, it was like, that's not firecrackers. That is gunshot. There is no question in my mind. So kind of started yelling at my parents and at my wife. And we're like, we need to get out of here, and just like got everybody up. And we started to, we just started to walk/run away. It was kind of surreal. And while I know it only took seconds, it seemed to go on forever. So it was in my head that this is not firecrackers. She's like, no, I think it's just fireworks or firecrackers. So, yeah.
You mentioned being physically okay, but of course less so sort of emotionally, mentally as you get a little bit farther away from this. What's it going to be like knowing that this is your hometown, a parade you'd been to for over a decade, and it's a downtown area where I'm sure you and your family are at times. How will you process that?
I hate it. I hate the fact that, we live in this amazing town with fantastic people. We're a very close-knit community. These are wonderful people here in Highland Park. And I will say I'm as guilty as everybody else of doing things like saying, oh, it's Uvalde or Parkland or Boulder or wherever it is. It's somewhere else. Those are other people. And it's not. It's Highland Park. It's right here. This is my hometown where we've lived for many years. And it's devastating. It really is. Prior to this, my wife and I were talking yesterday, and prior to this, Highland Park was known for, they filmed some famous movies here in our neighborhood, Ferris Bueller's Day Off and others. And I just hate the fact that now it's going to be in this long list of names of, towns that have been affected by these mass shootings.
Absolutely. There's also been some great stories of heroism coming out that I know will also be associated with your town and your people that live there. Gavin Solinger, thank you so much. We're so happy that you and your family are safe, and we appreciate you walking through that with us.
Thank you, Savannah.
And coming up, with the sky-high prices at the grocery store and gas pump, many Americans are pinching pennies. So what can you do to save money, and how concerned should you be about the threat of a recession? We'll go one-on-one with an expert up next. Welcome back. It's time for your weekly checkup. We have a full roundup of health headlines that you might have missed, including new research into what may be attracting mosquitoes and why being a weekend warrior at the gym might not be such a bad thing. NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joins us to discuss all these health headlines, and you're in studio with us, which is always so much fun. All right, Dr. John, let's talk through mosquitoes. So we were just talking. I said, I think that they love me. I get way more bites than everybody else, but this is a specific study about what might happen after a virus or something like that?
Exactly. We know that some people are more attractive to mosquitoes, and it could be the way they smell, it could be the clothes they're wearing, a lot of variety of things, because there are certain things that mosquitoes are attracted to, like the color blue. They like certain smells, carbon dioxide. If you breathe out a lot, they get that as well. But now we're finding out if you get certain viral infections, at least in this study, that can make you more attractive too. And in the study's case, it was Zika and dengue fever. It actually altered the bacteria in your skin, and it gave you a smell from a molecule called acetophenone. I don't think that's going to be a good perfume to have in the future, but what it did is it made it more attractive to mosquitoes. The problem is, if mosquitoes bite you and you have Zika or you have dengue fever, you then become a vector. They can pass it on to somebody else. And so what are the doctor's orders here? Well, the doctor's orders are, essentially you really can't change that smell at this point because they're still working on that. If you're sick, stay home. Like we mentioned throughout the pandemic, even if you're sick with something, just stay home because you want to protect yourself and others around you. But stay protected when you go outside and in your house too. Eliminate the resources for mosquitoes, the water that's sitting around. Use bug spray when you go outside, long clothes, the things you probably do since you're attractive to mosquitoes, to try and not get bit.
Yeah, so I think you're saying I smell?
That's kind of what I said.
Is that the conclusion? No, that is good. And those citronella candles, I do think that those help.
Yeah, they do help.
Those candles outside, it's cool. All right, let's talk about fitness. And now I know a lot of people think I'm going to work out during the week, take a break over the weekend. But there might be some benefits to packing it in on the weekend. Tell us about this.
And if you have a job, I don't want to pick on any specific job, so we'll make one up, let's say the news media, and you can't work out except for on the weekends, you're a weekend warrior, you've always probably wondered, am I getting enough of a workout? Because right now the standards are to try and get 150 minutes during the week of either moderate to vigorous workout or 70 minutes of very hard workout if you can during the week. Do it every other day, every day if you can. But what we now found out is there's no difference between the weekend exercisers and those who consistently exercise when it comes to overall mortality. As long as you get that 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous or 70 minutes of vigorous exercise. So what are doctor's orders? Well, the doctor's orders are essentially just to go out there and work out. There's no excuses to not working out now. So you want to go ahead and go out there.
I get this too.
Trying to work out, but find an exercise you enjoy.
There really is no excuse.
There's no excuse to working
harsh
out.
Doctor's orders.
I'm telling you. And just find somebody you can work out with, find something you have fun with, alter your workouts, but just get the workout in, even if it's only on the weekend.
My excuse is I get up really early. So
and the mosquitoes, don't forget the mosquitoes
tired,
too.
And I've probably got a bunch of bites, I'm too itchy. Okay, let's end on some good news. A woman was diagnosed with aggressive form of breast cancer. She underwent an experimental immunotherapy treatment. Now she's cancer-free. How big of a deal is this? Walk us through this.
This is actually a very big deal, and we know it is because we're finding out more and more about immunotherapy. First it was with lung cancer, and now we're finding out it seems to be working with breast cancer as well. And in this woman's case, she ended up having breast cancer. It was taken care of with chemo and radiation, but then it came back, and she was only given months to live. Well, now she's cancer-free because of this immunotherapy and another experimental drug she was given. So this is a big optimistic step towards care. So what does this mean? What are doctor's orders here? Well, essentially, like anything else, the sooner you diagnose cancer, the better. So, but also remember, everyone's cancer is different. So in her case, just because it worked for her and her type of cancer doesn't mean it's going to work for anybody else and their type of cancer. We're finding out cancers are just as individual as people are different as well. So need to find that out. But also make sure you get the screening, because early detection means early treatment, which means more chances for survival.
Oh, such good news there. Dr. John Torres, we love when you stop by. Thank you so much.
You bet.
And turning now to your money. It was another tough day on Wall Street yesterday. Investors are weighing fresh concerns about a potential looming recession. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other financial headlines. Hey, Silvana.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, well, we'll start with Wall Street because it is set to open lower after the market staged a sharp rebound yesterday. The Dow clawing back from being down more than 700 points. Oil prices are recovering some of yesterday's big losses. U.S. crude is back above $100 a barrel after closing below that level for the first time since late April on worries about a potential global recession. In focus today, data on the services sector job listings and how many people are quitting their jobs. The FDA has temporarily stayed a ban on the sale of Juul e-cigarettes, allowing them to stay on the market while the company appeals. Sales were blocked by the FDA last month, but a federal appeals court put that on hold. Juul, which is partly owned by Altria, claims the ban would cause the company irreparable harm. Amazon takes a prime step into the restaurant delivery business. It's buying a small stake in Grubhub and will offer Prime members free access to the service for a year. Members will get free delivery on orders over $12 in the 4,000 cities where Grubhub operates. The deal could drive traffic for Grubhub, which is owned by Europe's Just Eat takeaway and has lost share to DoorDash and Uber Eats.
All right. I'm pretty loyal to Caviar. I don't know what you think about that, but all these different apps, there's too many. I just like to stick to one.
There's so many.
That's
oh my gosh. There's just too many. Yes, yes.
All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
Now we're just days away from the release of June's jobs report, and experts say it could give us a better idea of what to expect from the economy for the rest of the year. The report is coming on the heels of one of the most expensive holiday weekends in recent history, this July 4th. Kristen Myers joins us now with a preview of the June jobs report. She's the editor-in-chief of The Balance. Kristen, good morning. So 2 quick questions for you here. What will you be looking for in this jobs report? But then also, how much insight is it going to give us to a possible R-word recession? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so right now what we're expecting essentially is about 250,000 jobs added to the economy. So I think first and foremost, a lot of folks are going to be looking at that headline number. Is it going to be a really big miss from what economists had been expecting? And how much has that job growth? We've got about 400,000 jobs added in May. How much slower is that job growth going forward? Unemployment is going to be the next big thing everyone's going to be looking at. It's supposed to remain unchanged from 3.6. Now, if that ticks upwards, or again, if we see a big miss on that headline number, so think only 100,000 jobs added, for example, we are really going to see folks start to react.
So now give us some tips. I mean, how can people prioritize their spending? Obviously, if you need things that just cost more, for example, at the grocery store, it is what it is. But what should consumers be thinking about?
Yeah, so right now, American consumers really have 2 things that they need to almost really worry about right now, right? So one is that inflationary environment that you're talking about. Everything is just getting so much more expensive. And then the second is a possible recession. So first, when it comes to that inflation, if you haven't gone and asked your employer, for example, for a raise or some sort of promotion, something that's going to increase your income, do it now before we head into a recessionary environment where that's less likely to happen. Then you really want to start making sure you are investing in that 401k, any employer-sponsored retirement plan. They probably are offering a match. If you're not doing that, start to do it. Otherwise, you're leaving money on a table. And then there's 2 things, Savannah, that really can help in terms of inflation in your portfolio. That's something called TIPS, and that's something called I-bonds. And then when it comes to the recession, really start to save more money and avoid making really big purchases or adding on to your debt.
All right, Kristen Myers, great tips there. Thank you so much. And coming up with LGBTQ rights front and center, many young people are worried about their future. Up next, I'll show you how one special summer camp is providing a safe space for LGBTQ plus teens to be themselves. Welcome back. A summer camp in Minnesota has become a go-to destination for LGBTQ plus youth from across the country. The camp says it provides space for teens to express themselves without fear of backlash or criticism. And right now, campers say the experience is more important than ever.
My dad was like, "So what's this camp again?" And I went, "Oh, it's gay camp." And he went, "What?" And I said, "I'm gay." And then I left for a week.
One Heartland is your typical summer camp.
Good afternoon, campers!
It's got cabins, a lake, arts and crafts, and archery. But for some of the campers who come here, there's nothing typical about it.
I don't have to worry about being misgendered or dead named or like literally just harassed for being myself.
During the True Colors sessions, LGBTQ plus kids come from all over the country to this camp in Minnesota to fully be themselves.
No matter who you talk to, you're gonna have at least one thing in common.
This is kind of just like a little safety net for people who are like me. When I'm here, it doesn't really feel just like a camp. It feels like another home.
One Heartland originally started in 1993 as a camp for kids affected by HIV/AIDS. About 10 years ago, they started the True Colors Sessions. And last year, they added a week specifically for trans and non-binary campers.
Well, the first year that we had a week for transgender and gender non-binary only campers, it was our most popular session and it had a waiting list. We've been growing at about 200% a year for the last 5 years.
And as a historic number of anti-LGBTQ+ bills have popped up across the country, Patrick knows this place is important.
I work harder because I know we need to be here for them, because I am scared for them every day. I'll continue doing everything I can to make sure that this space is here for those young people.
Well done, team. Nothing about my life is consistent other than camp, I think.
Brown squirrel, shake your bushy tail.
I don't even know what I'm gonna be doing in like September after this, but all I know is that I'm like, yup, next June, catch me up here in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota.
You guys are doing a great job. Why don't you head on in?
My name is Lou Ferris, and this is my 9th year with One Heartland.
Lou says coming to camp with kids who were like them and counselors who were part of the community too was huge.
Being around a community of queer people is one thing, but having people to look up to, that's completely different. I think for me, that was the biggest thing, was seeing someone that I could see myself in the future. Camp kind of gave me a jump start on something that could take other people years or like even decades to figure out.
Now, after years spent as a camper and a counselor, Lou's helping run the show as an admin.
Okay, back to one.
Working to keep camp the same happy shelter from the outside world that it still is for them.
The beauty of camp is that you're not defined by your gender, you're not defined by your sexual orientation, you're not defined by your like mental or physical illnesses. You don't have to do the whole scripted speech of like, here's what it means to be X. Like, they already know. You don't have to prove anything here. We take it at face value.
Cabin 1, do we have everyone?
So next year will be 10 years. I want to keep coming and being here as long as I can, just because I don't want to lose that second home. I don't think I ever will, but being able to be here, I think, is the biggest thing.
Isn't that neat to see? And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now, but the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.